truly is a tragedy, and I'm sure you always hear it referred to as the Orly tragedy. And what had happened is that a lot of prominent families in Atlanta, as you know, who were very interested in the arts and were interested in making Atlanta a more culturally relevant town. Part of the concept was that to be a big city in the South and to have what we deserve from a cultural standpoint, this group got together and went to Europe for a 3 week traveling tour of Europe, seeing art, etc. They were scheduled and did get on the plane on June 3rd, 1962. And during liftoff, the plane exploded and crashed and exploded. So everyone on that plane from Atlanta lost their lives. There were two crew members who survived the crash, but everyone from Atlanta did. And there are many children today, people that I know and you know, and many people in town know, that are around my age who were orphaned that day. And it truly was a tragedy. It turned into something wonderful, which is now today the Woodruff Arts Center. But we lost some of the people that you probably would imagine during the 60s and 70s would have been purchasing incredible art and celebrating and taking care of our culture. And those people were gone in a minute. So you can imagine that, of course, Atlanta stood still because who was on that plane and what their mission was. But I think all of the U.S. and Europe really took notice that day because it was the largest number of souls lost in a commercial airline, and it was Air France. So it was really, I think, something that kind of stopped the hearts of a lot of people to just reckon with the fact of that many people being killed all at once. Just recently, last year on June 3rd, we celebrated in a fairly small but significant way the Orly crash. We had a proclamation from the city council, and two of the survivors, Baxter Jones, who is on the high board today and was orphaned in that plane, was with us that day, and Ricky Bevington and her uncle Ricky. And of course, Ricky Bevington lost her grandmother that day. And I would say of the surviving families, Ricky has really been one of the ones who I think has put a lot of effort into, making sure we don't forget, because it's important to know our origin story, and it's important to remember these people who lost their lives. The art association, I guess you could say, did survive. There were others left, in Atlanta, but it has morphed, over the years. And to kind of skip forward a little bit, there was another thing that happened in 62 as well in August, and that was that Mayor Ivan Allen put out an $80 million referendum to build an arts center. And that referendum failed. There are probably lots of reasons that it did, but once that referendum failed, the Arts Association got together and basically said, we still want to do this. We still want to have something, a building there. And then, of course, Robert Woodruff stepped in with an anonymous gift of $4 million to build the Memorial Arts Center, which was later named the Memorial Arts Building, and then the campus in is when Robert Woodruff turned 93 is when the name was changed to be the Woodruff Arts Center. But it was really an evolution of that very group of people who had started it out with a little help from, of course, Ivan Allen. But the voters just voted it down. I don't think people really understood the significance of it at the time. Well, as I often comment, I think those people would be very, very proud. Today, the Woodruff Arts Center has three outstanding arts leaders. The High Museum of Art is phenomenal. It's been, you have the Renzo piano, which is the last part, the Richard Meyer, a gorgeous, gorgeous building with a very, very important collection. We have the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra, of course, 28 Grammy winner. We have the Alliance Theater, which is regional Tony Award winner, and all three of these art partners are really at the top of their game. The other thing that I would say, and I'm not sure necessarily that the people who were in that crash had this in mind, but in on top of having wonderful art and wonderful performances and things that people can enjoy, we've really have put a big emphasis on arts education, really for the last 10 to 20 years. And so I think some may be surprised at the level of arts education, because if you want to really be a cultural center and bring everyone together, you need to make sure the children are getting the art they need in the beginning as well. What happened very significantly is that when that referendum didn't pass, he stepped up with $4 million, which back then was a lot of money, to build this Memorial Arts Center building. And as it turns out, just like every other time we seem to live in, that wasn't going to be quite enough money with inflation, et cetera. And with a lot of very difficult, intense fundraising, is my understanding, that went on in Atlanta. They ended up with 7.1 million, and that was that extra 3.1 million came from 715 gifts. So, on a relative comparative basis, of course, Mr. Woodruff's gift was absolutely the biggest, and I think he was certainly the most iconic leader there. We know what he did around the civil rights movement, and with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Nobel Prize Award. So he, I think, really said to the rest of this market, the rest of the city, we're going to have a wonderful, wonderful cultural center, and let's just make it happen. When I've talked to people about it, um, there's there is just this still sense of loss, and some people would say that, had we not lost that group of, prominent citizens and citizens who cared about art, we would probably be even further along in our artistic and cultural journey here, because no other market that we know of had people, who would have been, again, purchasing art, making art, being sure art was here for us in the 60s and 70s. That's 2 decades, before their children grew up. And one other thing I would like to say about Mr. Woodruff is that he definitely had a sign in his office that said that, the saw about, it's amazing what you can get accomplished if you don't care who gets the credit. And so much of his work was done anonymously, that I think that had a little something to do with the referendum failing, because they just didn't know, where this money was coming from and was it going to be real and everything. So then when he finally allowed the group to turn the name into the Robert Woodruff Arts Center, I think was a pretty important day, and I'm for one glad that he did allow that. I think you remember them because it's important to know one's origin story. I think you remember them because there are many Atlanta orphans who suffered a lot, but are today giving back to the arts and have been incredible citizens. And I think you remember them because you never want anyone's life to be lost in vain. So the more we can do around culture and arts in Atlanta, because we know it's important. We know it's important for children's education. We know it's important for social and emotional and mental well-being. There are so many things that the art does for the soul and the mind and the heart. And I think we need to continue always to honor the people who lost their lives.